You are beautiful. You're made beautiful, Mark. You're great. And I literally stood back and I'm looking at myself, top to bottom. And it was the first time in my life, Matt, that I completely accepted myself and loved everything I saw.
Hello, and welcome to the One Heart Podcast. I am your host, Matt Allred. On this show, we interview real people with real lives, and we are open, raw, and honest. We talk about things that hurt, things that heal, and we are vulnerable so that we may truly become of one heart. Today, our guest is Mark Rowley. Having walked to the edge between faith and atheism, being ready to reject God, Mark began to see himself as a son of God. Mark has learned to love God and himself and has a desire to help others see their own beauty and be a light to those who may be on a similar journey. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matt.
It's good to see you today. I appreciate your time, and I've been looking forward to the conversation. It's struck me, Mark, since we met, it's been, a couple of years ago. It was at a men's retreat in Georgia. And honestly, it surprised me then, and it still surprises me a little bit that a non-Latter-day Saint is hanging out with these Latter-day Saint guys. And, we talk a lot about emotional wellness, emotional literacy, and kind of getting rid of the false self. And my question is, how did you come to pal around with this group? What was it that led you on this journey?
Matt, it's a great question and equally a hard question. And let me try to sum it up this way. Unbeknownst to your brothers Jeff and your brothers Jeremy from One Heart, One Light, who I met 2.5+ years ago at a different retreat, unbeknownst to them, I was in a place where I was searching and I didn't even know it. I was in a place where I was looking back at my decades of teaching, my decades of going through various churches, different faiths, many congregations.
Sure.
And looking back at how did it serve me and how did I serve my God through that. And it was about 3.5 years ago that, believe it or not, I actually considered walking away from, as I call it, God. And there were many things in I'm 48 years old. So through a lot of my life, I was taught things that, I should do.
Tell me just a little bit about, for our listeners' sake, a little bit more about your background and what was kind of the environment in which you were raised. Where was it that you were taught shoulds and shouldn'ts, and what did that look like a little bit?
Yeah. So I'm kind of a southeastern United States, Florida born. Grew up in Florida and Navy brat. Was raised Methodist. And then I chose, oh my gosh, Southern Baptist on my own. My family freaked out. What are you doing going to Southern Baptist in high school? And I was really just kind of chasing my friends in high school, and that's where they went. So I wanted to go. Then I went to a kind of an Episcopalian, then to a little bit more of a charismatic, speaking in tongues. I went all over the place. And I was chasing. I really believe, looking back, I was chasing. I was chasing for affirmation that God heard me, and more so that I can hear from God, that I existed. And the best I can say is, God, do you hear me? Do you see me down here? And there are many things along my path that I heard that troubled me, as if I don't do this or do that, or if I have done those things, which some of which I have,
Sure.
that somehow God's not gonna love me. God's not gonna want me. I'm not gonna achieve that place in heaven.
Sure.
And it troubled me. And so I developed a little bit more of a universalist type approach, trying to somehow reconcile and diminish and even push down what I was taught, what I really believed. And the belief and the desire was to connect with God, to connect with Christ, honestly, my faith. And but I felt somehow as if I was told I didn't deserve that. And then 3 years ago or so, here I am on a retreat out in the beautiful woods, and lo and behold, two guys approached me, and I had no idea who they were. And we're talking, and it was Jeff and Jeremy from One Heart One Life, your and now my organization that I'm a part of.
Sure.
They started speaking to me about this retreat, and they encouraged me to stay in touch. And so I went to One Heart One Light with the knowledge that I was considering consciously trying to separate myself from God, from Christ. I was going to the retreat with this belief that before you reject me, God, I'll reject you.
Sure. Just push them away.
Yeah, and it was a protection. And I was told it was a safe place to do this. I was told it was a safe place to bring my pushback, to bring my questions. And I've been to many, many different experiential weekends, Matt. When I say many, many men's retreats, many experiential weekends in my life. And this was the first that welcomed my spirituality, even no matter how fragmented it was.
Sure.
How much in question it was, I was told bring it. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to bring it. And so I brought, I showed up at the Light Within retreat, very curious, very open. And to sum it all up, what I can say is what I got out of it was when I walked out of that retreat, what I knew in myself was that while I may question what I was taught, while I may question what the pastor said, or what the doctrine says, or what the book says, yeah, I may question that. But guess what? I don't need to question or renegotiate my relationship with God.
When did that come to you, and how and in what way did you experience that?
I really believe I always knew it, Matt. But I needed men and brothers and sisters like you to confirm that in me. I needed to know that it was okay to question what I believed. I needed to know that it was okay to be angry, to be upset, to scrutinize so much of what I was taught. And then it was okay. So I came to the retreat with a hunger, with the desire, with curiosity. What I left with was confirmation and witnessing. My brothers are right alongside me, a willingness to acknowledge and even to some surrendering the questions, the confusion, whatever it was, the stuff that I had.
Sure.
and an openness to receiving whatever it was that God, Christ, wanted to reveal to me. Um, what I left with was the belief and the truth that I can have this dialogue with God. I can have this dialogue with Christ. It's okay. Um, and I did it alongside some beautiful men that did it with me, that showed me that it was okay, that gave me permission to question and be angry, gave me permission to say things that I would never say in my church. I would never say to my parents. Um, so um, I came to One Heart, One Light in the Light Within retreat because I truly was on the verge of walking away because I just didn't know how to reconcile.
So in other words, just for clarity's sake, it sounds like the messages you received through religion or from parents or from whoever basically was kind of forcing you into this notion that, well, if that's the case, then I have to just distance myself from God.
Yes, yeah. Like, well, I don't want to be rejected. I don't know anybody that would want to. So my thought was, well, before I'm rejected, then I'll reject you. And that was, and I consciously knew that.
Well, tell me a little bit about that, because from what I understand and what you've said in the past is that you've always been fairly religious. You mentioned sitting on the front row of church. It's like you've sought after God, but somewhere along the way, these messages said, well, he's going to reject you anyway. So why try? Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Um, namely, those messages, that I took on, those beliefs that somehow I'm not worthy, that somehow I am not part of the kingdom of God. That somehow I will not be called or achieved. Somehow that I'm I'm just some remnant. Um, it really revolved around my sexuality, and I identify as a gay man. And 20 plus years ago, I did everything I can to fight that. I went to what some call conversion therapy.
Sure.
What is conversion therapy and conversion camps? And I'm not lambasting them, because quite frankly, at the place I was in my life, I really believe they saved my life.
Sure.
Because you're also talking to somebody who um, had a gun in his lap at 1 o'clock in the morning with a
Sure.
loaded gun, and had considered ending my life because I didn't know how to reconcile, and there was no way I was going to be an abomination.
Sure.
And just those lies, because I'm not an abomination. I truly believe I am a creation of God, as I believe you and so all of us are.
Sure.
And but and that's my belief. That may not be everybody's. But it was in that and trying to reconcile my faith. How does that fit in? And largely, I was taught there's no alternative. It's this or that. There's
Sure.
no and. And what I've learned is that while I may question what I was taught, while I may question what I read, while I may question what I heard, while I may attempt to renegotiate, compromise what I've heard and what I've been taught, and I accept that, I'm human.
Sure.
While I may do that, I do not have to renegotiate. I do not have to confuse or reconsider my relationship with Creator. I do not need to ever do that. And I was at a point, Matt, where I was going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I was going to walk away from it all. And that's where your brothers told me, hey, you don't have to.
Tell me about your relationship with God right now, because it sounds like it's 180 degrees from just a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Um, my relationship with God is one that I try to walk with. It's a walk with.
Sure.
Um, for instance, somebody reached out to me recently, and it was an anonymous person. I had posted some things about just trying to uplift some people, and it garnered some anonymous text that I received, which were a blessing. And somebody had asked me, "Do you pray?" And it was difficult because I said, "Well, I'm not too sure what you mean by praying. I commune.
Sure.
I try to communicate. I try to listen. I try to almost in every aspect of my life. If today, at just a moment's notice, it's eight. Look at the time. It's 8:54. About 5 hours ago, I was in the middle of a forest, and call it weird, but what I heard was stop. What I heard was stop and look around and tell me what you see, because I'm trying to show you what I've created.
Wow.
And I literally just stopped for 5 minutes or so. And I slowly looked around and I saw what I call creation. I saw what I believe God created.
Sure.
That was the communion. It wasn't that I stopped and knelt down, by my bedside and prayed, which is beautiful. And I honor that, especially the discipline of that. But my relationship now is one that I want to always be open to. God, tell me, show me, speak to me at all hours, 24/7. If you need to wake me at 2 a.m, wake me.
Sure.
If you need to jar me. Whatever it is. So my relationship is such that I truly believe that I am a walking creation, a walking mirror, a walking image of Creator, and that through an openness and willingness, prayer, communication, a dialogue, that I can see things that I could tell you several years ago I wouldn't have seen. I can see a perspective
Sure.
that I wouldn't have seen several years ago. I can look at the mirror today and see somebody who I love.
Well, that's what I was starting to take away was not just that, hey, I love God now, whereas a couple of years ago I didn't think I did, but you certainly have a different, I believe, take on yourself than you had a couple of years ago. A different relationship.
Yeah. That's an understatement, Matt. Complete understatement.
Right.
This is how much of an understatement it is. Before I started doing this type of work, before I started connecting, allowing myself to be open and vulnerable with my brothers and sisters, before I allowed that, I can promise you that when I looked in the mirror, I hated everything that I saw.
Sure.
And what sickened me was I knew in my faith, I was going to say the top 2 commands in Matthew: love the Lord with all your heart, soul, spirit, strength. Love your neighbor as yourself.
Sure.
Different versions in the Gospels.
Sure.
And I always remember that, love your neighbor as yourself. Matt, I hated myself. So I knew intrinsically that I was hating my neighbors.
Sure.
I feared myself. So I was fearing my neighbors. I was fearing you. I didn't even know myself. So certainly I'm not going to know my neighbors. And then after I started doing this work, there was a time, truly the epiphany, and I remember the exact moment here in this house, right down that hallway, that I was getting ready for work in the morning, shaving, just in the bathroom, looking in the mirror like I traditionally do.
Sure.
And I saw myself differently all of a sudden. And I started smiling. And then I started laughing. I kind of stood back from the mirror and I'm going, it's like, I don't know how to explain it, but I love myself. I literally am looking at myself going, oh my God, you're beautiful.
Wow.
Like, and I'm not saying physically beautiful. Hey man, I can lose some weight. All right. I could body shame myself all day long. I'm talking about like just my soul, my spirit. It was just like, I literally look back. I'm like, you are beautiful. You're made beautiful, Mark. You're great. And I literally stood back and I'm looking at myself top to bottom. And it was the first time in my life, Matt, that I completely accepted myself and loved everything I saw.
That is huge. That is huge. How has that changed the way you view others? How has that revolutionized your life?
How's it changed? A revolution, Matt. So the whole, again, the verse I read about love your neighbor as yourself. At that moment after, it was instinctual, you see, because I loved myself at that moment.
Right.
And through mirrors, projections, through just natural, I promise you I loved you. I promise you I love my neighbor because I love myself. Love my neighbor as myself. It was no longer a chore. I didn't have to try. I didn't have to think about it. It was innate because I'm just reflecting what I have. And I love myself. I'm reflecting it. I mean, I don't know how to explain, but I'm talking about seeing coworkers walking down the steps in the stairwell and I'm talking on, how are you doing? I want to connect with you. How are you doing? It was the ability to see and accept my flaws, my questions, my imperfections, and to love myself. I naturally, without even thinking about it, it was exuded to anybody around me. And I'm saying that not as me. I'm telling you, other people said this to me, Matt.
Sure.
It was a light as today, a switch went off.
That's awesome. What I'm hearing and just kind of thinking through my mind is, when God looks at you, he sees a son of God. He sees a creation of his own in his image, as he does with all of us. And it's easy, I think, for us as humans to kind of project onto God, well, you need to behave this way if you want God to love you. But I think more, and what I came to at my first men's retreat was also from a place of self-loathing, self-hatred. I never lived up to my own expectations, but I came to this point where I kind of saw myself as a newborn baby, realizing that the babies come into the world and they are just loved. Everybody loves them. And have they accomplished anything? No, they haven't accomplished anything, but they're so valuable and, beyond any measure that we have. And I think that's the way God sees every one of us.
Agree. Yeah. And to find that, that connection, that unity, no matter from which doctrine, which church, which pew, which congregation, which ward, which some wards are different.
Sure.
No matter any of that, no matter age, all that, what I found was a oneness, a connection, a unity in the desire and the support from my brothers and my sisters to um, connect to that, to connect to Christ, to connect to Creator, to tap in to all that I'm created to be, and to live in that fullness. Um, and as you said before, at my first retreat, as I recall, majority of the people had no idea that I was not a member, of Latter-day Saints until like halfway through, or even almost over halfway through the retreat.
Right.
And the beauty of it didn't matter in that sense, that I just felt we were all unified. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're all children of God, whether we espouse a certain doctrine or not. We're still of the family of God, and I I believe that's what God wants. He wants us to love and accept each other, no matter where we're at on our eternal journey, and no matter what truths we happen to be, whatever, we're His children. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's end with a question, I guess, about what's one piece of advice that you would give to somebody who's struggling with self-loathing, who's maybe struggling to reconcile their relationship with God, and maybe they're standing at that precipice where you were, saying, I don't think I can do this God thing anymore.
It's a big question. It's so hard because I was there. I mean, I was so ready to give up. And again, your guys didn't know that. They had no idea where I was. I'm sad.
I hear you.
I'm sad because I understand what it can feel like, pain, and equally the courage it must take for any of you to consider walking away, abandoning, diverging from all that you may have been taught or believed or espoused, because that was me. The thing that kept me going, Matt, and I don't know if this will speak to any of your listeners, would be that I had to separate man from God.
I hear you. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds so silly, but I had to separate so much of what I was taught, or where I was harmed, or the harmful things that were said to me by believers, by followers, by my church members. The things that I was latching on to that were impregnated right here. I had to recognize that that was man saying that. That wasn't God saying that to me. And I really, really had to really understand and say, let me not let me give God another chance, but it was, let me just hear from God. Let me go to a place where I can really commune and hear from God.
Sure.
To separate out all the other voices, even if the voices are good intention, again, from my church leaders and my brothers and sisters in fellowship, maybe no matter how good intention, to separate that. Lack of a better word, I'm going to call it the noise. But and the other part of it was just scary. It was scary as heck.
Sure.
to think, what would I do? What would I do without a belief in creator, a belief in something greater than myself, and honestly, without a belief in purpose?
Sure.
I don't know where that would have landed me, and it was scary. And so the I guess that the message would be is I would encourage anybody to separate the two, to recognize it. Yeah, man, Matt, any of us may say something that offends you, that you may not agree with, that may even hurt you to the core. But I'm not God, and Matt's not God, and
Thank you, Mark. That's beautiful. I mean, and that message definitely resonates with me, and it should resonate with any Latter-day Saint, because that's our whole belief that started our church, was separating what men were saying from what God was saying. And I think it's perfect advice for any of us is go to God. What does
yes,
God think of you? If you've got
bingo, yeah,
issues with what men are saying, well, obviously it worked for you. Hearing a more pure message and being able to weed out whatever beliefs you had brought in and say, okay, those aren't of God. I choose to reject them. I choose to believe something better about myself.
yes.
Has changed your life.
It's done more than that, Matt. It saved my life, as I told you.
Yeah.
I'm only here because of that.
That's beautiful. Mark, thank you. I'll listen, we'll talk again later. Thank you for being on the show today.
Yeah.
And I appreciate your words of wisdom and your heartfelt love of self and God. That's beautiful.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks again for listening to the One Heart Podcast. Go ahead and subscribe and check us out online at oneheartonelight.org.